This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai Irarangi Te Motu, MPR.
Kia ora and welcome to Reserved Recommendations, a show about problematic faves, great trash, difficult art, and our complex relationship with art and entertainment. My name's Hugh, I'm the host, and I'd like to put in a very mild content warning for this show as a whole. Sometimes our recommendations on this show are reserved just because the thing that we're discussing is in some way not good. But sometimes there are aspects to the art or artist that may be confronting for some people. Read the episode descriptions for more information and do be aware of your listening environment. Welcome back to another episode of Reserved Recommendations. It gives me very great pleasure this evening to introduce my guest for today. This is Stef Animal, musical legend of various sorts. Part of the kind of secret history of this radio show and podcast is it's me finding an excuse to hassle people who I kind of admire and give them a reason to talk to me. And I was a Baby Me Star fan and have gone to follow Stef's other musical endeavors. So it's very, very slightly overwhelming to have you with me. Thanks for agreeing to come on the show.
Well, what an introduction. Hi, howdy. Thanks for having me.
Well, as I say, thanks for coming. So the kind of central conceit of the show is that we talk about kind of musical or other artistic things that we're fans of in perhaps a slightly embarrassing way. And the thing that you wanted to talk about was a band I am very fond of called The Magnetic Fields. So I guess a starting point for people who aren't familiar, like, what are the magnetic fields? Who are they? Where do they come from?
Well, that's a good question. It's a little more complicated than the answer would be to most other bands. The Magnetic Fields is a label that songwriter Stephen Merritt from the USA kind of uses to release music. And there are other members of the band that he kind of gets to help record songs and play live and things. But really it's sort of a vehicle for his very varied songwriting. And he has a few other sort of vehicles in the same way. But the Magnetic Fields is his most kind of well-known, best-selling, I suppose, moniker. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a one-man band plus sort of thing, because Stephen Merritt's one of these people who's, as well as being the songwriter and the singer for most things, he's a multi-instrumentalist. So on some Magnetic Fields recordings, he'll be playing almost everything as well as singing it. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah, he sure is. He's very much a songwriter in a way that many other songwriters aren't, and I think he sort of treats it like a job rather than sort of a way to express himself in a sort of an academic exercise. And so he approaches that in lots of different ways. And I suppose he doesn't, on different days it makes more sense for him to have others around to help him, and other days, he does it all himself because he's someone who has a very strong vision, I think, for what he wants to do.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if people have heard any Magnetic Fields things, they've probably heard a cover of a Magnetic Fields thing, because Peter Gabriel did quite a famous cover of a song called The Book of Love, which comes from an album called 69 Love Songs, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's 69 songs about love, some of which are very short, which is how you get to have 69 of them on one album. But like, where I was going with this is a lot of his albums as the Magnetic Fields have that kind of like strict concept to them. So there's an album called Distortion where everything is in some way distorted. There's an album called 69 Love Songs, which is literally 69 songs about love. There's an album called I where everything starts with an I. Like, there's always some kind of formal constraints that he puts on himself and works within.
Yeah, which I really like. I think it's once again sort of I suppose like a work ethic thing rather than sort of an artistic, heartfelt way of directing himself. And I think what that means for me is that if there's an album of his that I don't particularly like for whatever reason, and that does happen, I still like the idea. There's always an interesting angle on it, or the instruments he's decided to use, whatever kind of vision he's had for the record. It's always kind of worthwhile and sometimes quite funny. Yeah, so I admire that.
I mean, there are kind of two threads I want to pull on there. We'll go with the humour one first because I think that's probably the simplest. One of the appeals for me in Stephen Merritt's songwriting, and I think it comes across particularly strongly on 69 Love Songs, is he's a guy who's capable of writing a song that's simultaneously heartbreaking and quite funny. And that's a rare talent.
Yeah. I think definitely that's sort of one of his strong points. And he can't help himself, I think. He's written sincere kind of sounding songs for sure, but I think it's part of his wry personality, I think, is sort of throwing in a self-deprecating or sort of a mean, some kind of, twist on the sincerity that suddenly brings in a whole kind of funny gag. And many of them are laugh out loud, I think. And even now I'm still sort of listening closely and uncovering kind of funny quips that I hadn't noticed or hadn't kind of clicked with. Yeah. But smart guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that smart guy and can't help himself are two kind of very sharp observations about him, because you're right. It's not necessarily always that he needs to subvert what he's done with a joke, but everything always needs to be delivered in this very almost kind of literary way. He's got this very precise way with words and he'll always use a very specific image. The thing that pops into my head is there's a song on 69 Love Songs, which has got the recurring refrain, your love is wrapped around my heart like a boa constrictor, babe, which, like, it's quite an unwieldy line, and he manages to make it land really well every time, which is very clever. But also, that's not just any kind of heart image. That's a very specific thing that he decided to go with and then stick with.
I think absolutely. I don't often listen to music for the lyrics. I'm not someone who's a great sort of admirer of lyricists, except in this case. And I mean, I think it's impossible to enjoy the magnetic fields without sort of the lyrics being really in your face because they're so sort of particularly written. But one of the other things I love about him, and I think he does this with melodies as well, is that they can be very, very clever and very crafted, but a lot of the time his lines and jokes and even the rhymes and things and phrases can be really throwaway. And he will just kind of, he'll have an image such as that, which is a great image. And then he'll build a whole song around it. And sometimes in order to do that, he has to kind of pick quite outrageous rhymes to make it work. And I think I really like the fact that he doesn't really discriminate between kind of lines of genius and lines of sort of, casual efficiency or something. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that struck me immediately about, and we're going to keep coming back to 69 Love Songs because it's the album I know best, but like he's someone who's simultaneously very clever and clearly puts a lot of thought into as well as the lyrics, melodies. The reason that Peter Gabriel decided to cover Book of Love is it's got that da 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 melody in the chorus, and it's just lovely, and it'll seep into your head and never come out. But also that song, because I play it on the guitar, it's written around a 4-chord loop that never, ever, ever, ever changes. And so there's often this really kind of rudimentary formalism to the kind of stuff he does musically. Like, it'll have clever hooks and things, but it's often built on a kind of, I don't know, it reminds me of the Velvet Underground more than anything. There'll be a really basic structure at the bottom of everything. He's not a prog guy.
Yeah, It's true. And sometimes the structures are quite odd and he just forces them on the listener because that's his, not odd, just, like I don't have a good example. But yeah, you're right.
There's a song called Absolutely Cuckoo, which is more or less impossible to sing live because it uses this really da 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 kind of rhythm, and the first word of each line hits on the same beat more or less as the last word of the previous line. So I'm pretty sure that he must have recorded it in kind of layered takes.
There's no breathing space.
No, there's no breathing space at all, and it's a really weird da 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 da. It's not a rhythmic structure that crops up in Western music very often, but every line hits it like completely rigidly, and it's very odd to try and like sing or play.
It's an assault, that song. Yeah, he just runs. He's got this idea and he runs with it, and then it's over. Yeah,
because it's also like 2 minutes and then stops with this weird little beep, beep, beep noise that just kind of hangs around and annoys you. And 2 minutes is long enough for him to sing the entire song through twice.
That's right, he does it twice. That's one of the other things I really love about him, and I think 69 Love Songs really exemplifies this, is that his approach to production is not really like anyone else's approach. I think he's very interested in production, and there's whole albums such as Distortion, which have a very particular production throughout. It means that the songs don't really sound like any of his other albums. But still, of course, recognizably, the songwriting is his. But yeah, he's not an act who, for the most part, survives off having a signature sound, which is how most bands or musical artists kind of work. They find a niche and they kind of do it. But he's a magpie, which sounds it's hard to explain to people how that could be successful. It sounds sort of exhausting or disappointing or something as a listener, but I find it really appealing. He finds a style that works for him for a song and runs with it. And then the song is recorded and done, and he doesn't sort of agonize over it. And so at 69 Love Songs, it definitely sort of coheres as this strange, wonderful masterpiece, but it's all over the place. And I find that really charming and freeing. Yeah. Yeah,
no, you're right. He's very much a stylistic magpie. And as you say, 69 Love Songs is a great example because there are 69 songs and some of them are like a minute long. But he'll commit 100% to being country and western for a minute and a half, and then his next song will be a different thing, and his next song will be a different thing. One of the things that I think makes his albums cohere is that, as well as the songwriting, which I think you would probably, once you've listened to a few of them, I think you would probably spot a Stephen Merritt song because, like you said at the start, I don't think he can help himself from being clever and having this slightly arch posture in a lot of his songs. But also he's got a very distinctive singing voice, and it's not a conventionally, finger quotes, good voice, but it's very effective the way he uses it, and it also becomes very easy to spot and makes things cohere.
Yeah, I love his voice. It's interesting for me because I know at the start he couldn't stand hearing his voice recorded, and he, as he still does, had other vocalists sing his songs to begin with. But he's an incredible singer, really, and kind of uses his voice very carefully and very particularly. And I do get sad. I know the last album that they released, Quickies, a bunch of really short songs on it. That was The Angle. I don't know. He sings a little bit on it, but it's mostly, another vocalist. And I do miss him sometimes when he's not there. So it's nice to hear the writer delivering the material. Yeah.
Yeah, I think something about the quality of his voice, because as you say, he's very careful and precise about the way he uses it. He doesn't sound like a trained singer necessarily, but he will sort of make gestures in the direction of being a crooner, or he'll make gestures in the direction of kind of adopting a particular vocal style. So he's clearly very careful about it, and that sense of having decided to think very hard about the delivery kind of fits with the way that the lyrics seem very considered.
Yeah, absolutely. I get the feeling, he's literary for sure. He's also, I feel like he's a reclusive, shy theatre kid or something who can only sort of get that part of his personality out in recording or something, or delivering, writing these songs.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a thing that you know much about. It's not a thing that I know a huge amount about. One of the things that I was struck by when I first started listening to his music is he makes a lot of use of acoustic instruments and things which, if they're amplified, are not amplified necessarily in the normal way. And in doing a little bit of reading, that seemed to be related to a problem with like tinnitus or something like that he had.
Yeah, I think his ears or his brain or whatever can't handle loud sounds very well. And I think his approach to recording probably reflects that. And I remember reading for the Distortion album, which I think was originally the idea of it was supposed to sound like the first Jesus and Mary Chain album. The kind of distortion they used was sort of harmonic frequencies, like things bouncing off walls and things. I'm not quite sure how much of that is true, but very interesting, as opposed to, having a room full of incredibly loud amps. Yeah.
But I was going to say,
you first.
I was going to say, or either amps which are acoustically loud, or just pushing circuits till they can't handle it anymore.
Yeah. Definitely, sort of. I think I always feel like listening to his various albums that he is very interested in production or sort of changing the rules to suit him. And I know he favors the ukulele, for example, which is not an instrument I really enjoy the sound of very much, but that's by the by. But he also seems to take delight in destroying the sound of a ukulele, kind of puts big, ugly choruses on them with strange tremolo effects so that they don't really sound like a regular ukulele. And I am sort of simultaneously baffled and thrilled by that. And I know, especially sort of in his earlier albums, he used a lot of synths and drum machines and stuff. And one of his albums, I think it was Holiday, all the drum sounds were created by him sort of drawing the wave forms with a mouse on an old-fashioned sampler. And that's why that album sounds the way it does, because he drew all the drum sounds himself. Yeah, I think, he's not someone who approaches production in a traditional way.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those kind of perennial, when you get a lot of musos in a confined space, one of those perennial things that comes up is that people can be quite snobbish about the definition of a good sound. And I've always felt like it's much more important to think about a fitting sound. And I think the magnetic fields are a great example of that, because as you say, Stephen Merritt will take an instrument and do something with it which in isolation could be quite ugly, or make use of something which is quite limited in a lot of ways, like a drum machine where you've hand-drawn your samples so that they're going to sound quite unnatural, and that's the one way that drum can sound. You can't get expression out of it, but then to make that fit into what he's doing. And that's a real talent. There are lots of people who will go, I've got this really great guitar tone, but if it doesn't gel with the rest of the band, then it's not a lot of use.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, because in production, there are rules. There are rules that one should follow, and one can break the rules. But I think it's always good to remember that a good sound is one that makes the music work, and that could be anything. And I think that's definitely the foremost thing to remember, and also to remember that it can make the music work in ways that may be surprising to you. I
mean, I really like the I really like things that are ways of introducing elements of chance. One of the things that I play around with electronic music production is I use a very old piece of software that's been reconfigured for Windows 10, which is called Buzz.
Whoa. Oh, great.
It started back in Windows 95 days. But one of the drum machines you can get for Buzz, you have to give it waves because it doesn't have any internal sounds. So you have to go and find drum sounds. But the way that it triggers them is by having a percentage instead of a trigger. So you can say, I want there to be like a 90% chance that this drum will be hit on this beat. And it means that you can never quite predict what it's going to do. And sometimes if you've been canny, it can sound human-like, but it can also make very strange, like from a drummer's perspective, choices about what things it's going to trigger when. And you can end up with these really odd drum fills. But it's kind of nice because then you have to kind of work around that.
That's marvelous.
And you also can't, because the percentage is it's new each time you play the song. So if you can't guarantee that it's going to render out the same way that it did when you were listening to it when you were trying to sequence it. And you also can't guarantee that it'll behave the same, every time you play through a particular loop. So it'll I love that kind of
real drummer, I guess.
Yeah. Only a real
vaguely
a real drummer with an unnatural number of arms.
yeah, and a propensity to just miss whole beats.
Yeah. No,
that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's a cool toy. I really wish there were ways of importing it into other platforms that aren't quite as impenetrable in terms of user interface.
Yeah, I have a funny feeling that Luke Rowell, Disaster Radio, used that for years for all his early records, the same software,
It was quite popular for a while in the 90s, and then it got superseded by a lot of things that didn't get you to do things like input percentages in hexadecimal, which is an unfriendly thing to ask people to do.
These days, yeah, for sure.
All right.
What fun.
Well, so we're probably about halfway through on this conversation. We're going to take a break for station messages. But before we do that, it might be quite cool to play a song, perhaps one off the 69 Love Songs album, because we have been talking about that a fair bit. Is there a particular pick that you have?
I have so many favorites. Shall we start with a weird one?
Yeah.
One of my favorites is Strange Eyes.
All right. Excellent. Well, I will play that now, and we will be back right after this.
support this show and others like it by giving a donation. For more information, go to www.mpr.nz/donate.
And we're back. You're listening to Reserved Recommendations. This is a show about complicated relationships with art and culture. And today I'm talking to Stef Animal about the Magnetic Fields, who are actually not a band that I have particularly complicated feelings about. I just kind of unironically love everything they do. But I suppose if I were to have reservations about just introducing complete strangers to the Magnetic Fields, it would be that, you know, Stephen Merritt is not a conventional vocalist. A lot of the arrangements are strange. You will get very short country songs about beheaded chickens right next to quite like heartfelt songs. And all of that could be kind of quite a lot to handle all at once.
That's so true. I think I don't know how I would introduce someone to the Magnetic Fields. I think I'd probably sort of put my hands up and say, I don't know, you'll probably hate most of it, or I don't know. Yeah, I probably have to find your own way in.
Yeah, I mean, I found my way in by watching some, I can't remember what the thing was now, but there was something which had Peter Gabriel's version of The Book of Love, and I thought, Peter Gabriel, but that's a really cool song. And then I checked and discovered that it came from this band, The Magnetic Fields, and went and checked that out. And my taste is such that I usually prefer a spiky or wonky original to a more polished cover. And I was kind of stuck from there. So, I mean, you could try that. How did you find your way into the Magnetic Fields then, and what impact has that had?
I had a flatmate with really good music taste. Actually, I've had a lot of flatmates with a lot of good music taste, and he had this compact disc lying around. I was of the age where he used compact discs, which I love, and it was the Magnetic Fields, and it was this sort of album from the 90s called The Charm of the Highway Strip. And I hadn't really heard anything quite like it. It was kind of a sad country album, except a lot of the sounds were sort of synthesizers and funny sounds I recognized from the 90s. I guess funny kind of MIDI boxes and drum machines and things. But the songs were just really captivating and strange. And looking back, actually, it's a strange choice because there aren't really many jokes on it. It's one of his more sincere efforts. But then in the same household, I didn't realize it was a copy of 69 Love Songs. And he said, oh, you like that? You have to listen to this album because it's very, influential and it's a big deal. And it's hard to explain to you because all the songs are different, but I'll just play it to you. And I had to sift my way through these almost 70 songs, which is an exciting experience for anyone, I think. This is sort of like approaching a 3-novel set of something. His approach, I hadn't kind of come across anything like it. I listened to lots of people who make lo-fi music or whose shtick changes in the early part of their career to the later part of their career. But never anyone with his approach, sort of light-hearted, eclectic approach to making music. And I have been a big fan ever since, and I do hesitate to call myself a fan because I find that rabid fans of anything are a bit crazy. So I try not to talk about it too much, but I suppose I'm not an obsessive, but I would listen to anything he made.
I mean, that certainly, I think that's a kind of a marker of a particular kind of artist, because I think I have the same feeling that if I heard that Stephen Merritt had done, like, I don't know, music production for a movie or for a TV show, I would be really interested in how that was going to turn out. Or if I heard that he decided to write a musical, I'd be really interested in seeing that, to try to work out how that would come out, because he's got such a kind of singular taste that it feels like anything that he decided to do would be very much like him, and that version of any other art form would always be an interesting thing to check out at least.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I have other artists who I feel, filmmakers and things, who I feel the same about. Yeah, films of theirs I don't really like, but I still, I want to see them, and I want to, because I appreciate, the process or the ideas behind it. Yeah, yeah.
There was a thing that you mentioned back kind of towards the start of this conversation about how you'd heard that he was quite uncomfortable initially with the sound of his own voice and wanted other people to sing his songs. And I remember reading an interview with him, I think, about 69 Love Songs in particular, where he said that the original concept for that album was that it was going to be put together as a drag show. And so the idea was that all of these drag queens would take turns singing all of the different songs on that album. And in a thing that was a bit hard to tell whether he was like being deliberately nasty for fun, or whether this was actually part of his concept, was that the audience would vote on which one of them got paid on the basis of their performance.
It definitely sounds like one of his many bullshit stories that I'm sure he would have thought of, but doesn't sound like anything he would follow through with.
No, but I found the idea, since you'd said that he was kind of uncomfortable with his own voice, that he'd originally thought of this as, kind of I guess like a cabaret or something, where all of these different performers, so you would have someone come out in the cowboy outfit and do the cowboy song, and then someone come out in a kind of sparkly dress and do one of the torch songs, and all that kind of approach.
Very good way of deflecting attention away from yourself, for sure. Yeah. I think I must, because there's a documentary film about him and them, and I feel like that must have been hard for him. Not that he's incapable of talking about himself, but he always seems like quite a private person to me. But it's a nice little documentary. Lots of honest kind of squabbling and stories. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know it existed. Can you tell me what it's called? That sounds like a thing I should track down.
Yeah, you should definitely track it down. It's called Strange Powers. Maybe it has a subtitle, but it's named after one of his famous earlier songs. And it's following them, I think at the time they're recording Distortion, and it kind of traces their career and the surprise success of 69 Love Songs. Has them on the road kind of arguing, and interviews with his mother, which he's really embarrassed about. Just a nice little indie music documentary. Yeah.
So, speaking of music, you are a musician yourself, as I mentioned at the start. Do you draw inspiration from any of the kind of Magnetic Fields' approaches?
Yeah, I should probably own up to a couple of things right now. One of them is that for a few years I was in a Magnetic Fields covers band in Wellington called the Magnetic Frauds, with a couple of friends. We used to play gigs at Mighty Mighty and things. So, there's that. And also for a while I was going to make an album of fake Magnetic Fields songs. And I wrote a few of them. It was going to be called 13 More Love Songs or something. But the world doesn't need any more Magnetic Fields songs, especially not fake ones. He's written enough of them. He just put out that 50-song one, a couple of years ago. But it was a fun excuse to try and write in his style. But of course, I fell down trying to write the clever, witty verses. Yeah, but it was a fun experiment.
I guess the first thing is, I almost, you always feel awkward or it's It's like the mistake of trying to psychoanalyze historical figures, but trying to kind of guess what someone would think from their artistic output. But I kind of get the sense that he might be into the idea of a fake magnetic fields as a kind of companion to the actual magnetic fields.
Possibly, as long as it wasn't terrible, I think.
But I could see that sort of appealing to the same kind of impulse. I guess the thing that kind of got me to ask that question in the first place is that you've put out an album called Top Gear, which is about using like a singular specific bit of often obsolete equipment for each song, and I wondered if that, because that's a bit of kind of magnetic fieldsy, like rigid formal structure, and I wondered if that had been an inspiration.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Especially I guess that first experience of listening to him when I recognized all these sounds from the 90s, and we sort of wondered which bits of equipment they were. And I have a habit of kind of buying cheap musical equipment because I can't afford the fancy stuff, and kind of harvesting nice things from it. And I really, definitely related to his approach of just finding random sounds to create an effect. But also just the rules, the artistic rules around each song or each record that he has in terms of whatever it may be. The recording process or the equipment used or the themes definitely has influenced me. And I found actually I can't get anything done unless I have some really restrictive rules. It's the only way I can finish things. And so, Top Gear was definitely a way to give that a go and provide myself some really strong restraints in terms of what gear I was allowed to use and how much time I was allowed to spend on each track, which was just sort of one day. And I guess armed with sort of a fake confidence that I'd be able to pull it off and that I would be able to produce something musical in a day, I kind of plowed ahead, and it turned out good enough, I thought, musical enough. And it reminds me actually of when he was thinking about making 69 love songs. I read an interview with him. I think originally it was going to be 100 love songs. And he, 69 is a good compromise. But he said that he thought he might have an aptitude for writing an album of 100 love songs, and it's something he might be able to do if he, just when it seems crazy, but he's just going to go ahead and force himself to do it. And I find that a very relatable story, just to make a decision about what you're going to do and execute it. It's kind of mad, but better than faffing around.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, the faff around is it's like increasingly popular, not popular. It's increasingly possible, particularly if you work in a digital audio workstation. There's always another button you could push, or another filter you could apply, or another thing you could fiddle with.
Freaks me out.
No, there's awful decision paralysis that can happen. The thing that I was reminded of actually is that that idea of giving yourself a really strict rule and just refusing to break it. It's not only incredibly valuable, but it shows up in places you wouldn't expect. There's a song, I can't remember what album it's on now, but do you know Lucinda Williams? She's like an alt country person. Yeah. So she wrote this song called Like a Rose, which I really like. And I read a thing, which was an interview with her, and she was saying, and I hadn't realized this about the song, was that it was an exercise in trying to write a song with this really specific structure, and without the ability to have any kind of a chorus or a bridge, like just have the whole thing flow as one unit. And I really like it. It's got like a refrain line, which is almost chorusy, but she kind of manages to avoid having a chorus. And I thought that was really interesting that I hadn't picked from listening to the song in the first place. It just kind of grabbed me and I liked it. But then she said this thing about how she'd given herself these really strict rules for writing it. And I kind of went back and went, I hadn't thought of that at all, but that's definitely how it is.
That's great. Well, I mean, we're so tied to these conventions, aren't we? That, exciting things can come from just a simple rule like that.
Yeah, and as I say, it's the best way out of, because isn't that it's part of what's his face, Brian Eno's oblique strategies as well. Here is a constraint that you now have to work with to get yourself out of decision paralysis.
I love those. I've never actively used them sort of in a creative project, but whenever I think I have them on my Twitter feed or whatever, I follow a generator, and they're always charming and interesting, and sometimes kind of outrageous or absurd, but in a perfectly wonderful way. Yeah. I one of my other favorite musicians, this Dutch electronic guy, he also sometimes has kind of production hints, kind of slightly jokingly in his blog, and they're funny things like turn your keyboard around backwards and try playing it from behind to see if you play, any interesting notes you might not otherwise do, or put some incense in your studio, wear a different hat. And I suppose that you can laugh at them, and they're supposed to be slightly humorous, but sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, there's two things actually. There's a local musician who goes by the name Bing Turkby. And the difference between Craig, who is the guy who works at the library, and Bing Turkby, the wild and crazy rock and roll guy, is that Craig has very short cropped graying hair, and Bing Turkby has this incredible melodramatic curly brown wig that comes down over his eyes. And the transformation is magical and instantaneous when the wig is applied.
Yeah. Wow.
But there's also I can't remember what it was now. I think it was like a comic that was a collection of stories about people playing music. It was one of these sort of autobiographical indie comics things. And this person wrote this story, which was about being in a garage band, and they just they were banging away and nothing was really gelling and they weren't having a good time. And then someone dug out a box of wigs and everyone put on a bad wig, and kind of like everyone wearing the same bad wig kind of created this telepathy, and suddenly everything locked in.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff can work. Even when it's
even just lightening the mood sometimes. Yeah, that's right. Can get one unstuck. Yeah.
And certainly if you play an instrument that requires like physical interaction with the thing, like playing a guitar or a keyboard, it's very easy to develop like boxes that your hands want to go into.
Yeah, so true. So yeah, like alternate tunings, that's a good one. Forcing yourself to play with your guitar tuned in a way that you wouldn't normally. So maybe you overthink how it's going to work, or maybe you just run with it and see what notes come out and surprise you. Yeah, I have that problem. Guitar's my main instrument. I love playing guitar, but I can't for the life of me make interesting music out of it because I'm very stuck. So that's why I resort to kind of synthesizers and computer-based music, because I feel a little freer. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's the way it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have the same thing. I play guitar and bass, but, there is a particular stretch between these two fingers here, which listeners can't see. And that interval is one that I want to play over and over again because it's very easy to do. And if you put notes into a sequencer, you're typing them in, so you're not constrained by what your fingers want to push. And you can deliberately go, well, this is probably going to be discordant as all hell, but I'll type all of these notes in and then see if I can make a thing that works with it or something.
Yeah. It's so different, isn't it? Because I think playing an instrument, like sort of in real time with your body, you're sort of vibing and you're creating this music. But it's so different using kind of technology in that way, because you really have to vibe with your mind, or you have to use the force or something. Or you just have to sort of wait and see. And it's there's sort of a funny disconnect there, but in some ways I like the distance. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite kind of mid-career hinge points for a band is the like two weird electronic albums that Radiohead released in like the early aughts, or I think around there, but Kid A and Amnesiac. where they went, let's not be a rock band, let's make weird techno with Tom York saying nonsense on top for a couple of albums. Part of the thing that was great about that is that the warehouse in Dunedin, on the strength of the sales of OK Computer, bought a huge stock of both of those albums, and so you could get them for like $2 each for a while because they just couldn't shift them. Because all of the people who were like, more Creep, more OK Computer, bought Kid A and went, what?
Yeah, I enjoyed those a lot when they came out. Because, there's a lot going on for the year, especially at the time. A lot that felt sort of a little bit new.
And, well, I guess the thing that struck me about those is that they were kind of an exercise in telling a computer to do a thing and then having to kind of come along and play with it as a human. So you've created a constraint by having a computer play a particular chord progression, and then you have to play a lead over this chord progression that you would never have put together if you were just going to play a thing. I admire them for pulling that off. Like, tricky, forging new paths when you're used to playing as a band. Hard work. Definitely, and that's why there are not many Radioheads or Magnetic Fieldses for that matter.
Along those lines, one of my least favorite Magnetic Fields albums is an album called Realism, where there are they made a few albums with no synths or whatever, but Realism, all the instruments are acoustic and there's sort of harps and maybe there's some harpsichords and things, and it's all sort of, the production is, for once quite lush and clear and big, and I find it really hard to listen to, and actually not because of the production, just because I don't really like the songs, but in spite of that, there are two completely unmissable songs on that album for me that I couldn't live without, and I'm happy they're in my life. But it's interesting to me. I don't know how much someone can kind of shift around from album to album. Not restlessly, just on a whim. It seems like a lovely lifestyle.
Well, do you want to maybe play one of those two unmissable songs off that album? I'm sure I can find it and put it in at this point.
down.
That was the Magnetic Fields with I Don't Know What to Say from the album Realism, and I am talking to Stef Animal on reserved recommendations. So we are getting close to the end of the show, and there are a couple of things I like to do by way of finishing off. Firstly, thank you very much for talking. You've been very generous with your time, and that's it's been a lot of fun. The first thing that I like to do is to ask if you have any things that you would recommend. If people have listened to the couple of Magnetic Fields songs that we've played, or they already knew about the Magnetic Fields and they're big fans, are there other people, other things that you would suggest people go and check out?
Gosh, it's hard to relate anything to such a strange musical act. But I suppose one of the other people I'm a fan of who have a similar sort of cavalier approach to their music career and have gained similar kind of indie success is this Dutch guy, Lego Welt, who he makes a lot of sort of thumping electronic music, but also makes screeds of sort of strange ambient albums. Very prolific, very lighthearted in a very similar way, and also very cool and strange for a Dutch person. Apologies to any Dutch listeners. Lego Welt, aka Danny Wolf, is another sort of bohemian musician with an approach that I really enjoy. So that's all I can think of right now.
So I had two thoughts. One in terms of using bad sounds effectively would be the later career of Tom Waits. If you want to hear someone make excellent use out of, like, we're just going to throw the cutlery drawer down the stairs and that's our rhythm track. The later career of Tom Waits.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's full of all that sort of things. There's percussion, which is him just destroying a chest of drawers with a 2x4, and then they sing over the top of it. All that kind of stuff. The other thing is there's a Wellington musician who I've actually had as a guest on this podcast, is a guy who plays music under the name The Fatalities. And he is a one-man band, much more kind of straightforward rock and roll in terms of instrumentation, but there is a certain archness and self-deprecation and humor to his songwriting that gives me occasional Stephen Merritt vibes. Particularly, he's written a song called Crybaby, where the chorus is, I'm a crybaby, I let everybody down, so on and so forth. But it's written over this beautiful kind of like 4-chord doo-wop kind of structure. So it's got this kind of soaring pop thing going on while it's singing about how much of a useless crybaby he is. It's cool.
That sounds charming. I'm going to look that up.
Yes. Yeah. No, very charming. And you can find it on Spotify and Bandcamp. And I bothered him when I had him on the podcast about like letting people pay for his stuff on Bandcamp, so you can now give him money if you want to, which you used to not be able to, which was a travesty.
Yeah, it's worth having the option, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Well, as I say, thank you very much for coming on the show. The last thing that I like to do is give people an opportunity to plug their shit, because this is, after all, a non-profit radio station, and I cannot pay guests, which is the thing that one ought to do. So you should at least get a little promotion out of it. What things do you have that you want people to find?
Well, the main thing really is my album Top Gear that we were talking about earlier. And I'm making a sequel to it this year, which I think is going to be called Top Gear 2. So every couple of weeks I sit down and make a song in a day. But yeah, Top Gear is available on Bandcamp and Spotify and YouTube and all over the place. You can also get it on compact disc, which once again is a format I love. And that's available. I think there's a link on my Bandcamp page. Also, I'm going to play some shows in April. Coming to Auckland and Wellington and Auckland, 9th and 10th. I can't remember which way around this goes. But April 9th and 10th, North Island, and then maybe some South Island stuff after that, with my friend Collier, who is releasing a couple of remixes of my tracks as well. So that's upcoming. That's all I have to plug.
So,
except, of course, for the Magnetic Fields, who I will plug right now.
Oh, yes, definitely. Go listen to more Magnetic Fields. What is the URL for the Bandcamp page?
That's a good question. I imagine it's something like bandcamp.stefanimal. Let me see.
They're all like the band's name.bandcamp.com, but
I found it. Okay, so my name, Stef with an F -animal.bandcamp.com.
Brilliant. All right, go find Stef-animal.bandcamp.com. Thank you very much for talking.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a blast. Nice to talk to another fan.
You've been listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. The show is produced and presented by me, Hugh Dingwall, and I also composed our theme music. It's called Sack Jazz, and you can find it at wolfboy.bandcamp.com. You can find me on the internet at Objective Realty on Twitter, and you can find the show on Facebook under Reserved Recommendations. If you've got a reserved recommendation of your own, feel free to pitch it to me in either of those two places. And if you enjoyed the show, why not go ahead and recommend it to a friend? You can find past episodes at www.mpr.nz/show/reserved on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, Manawatu People's Radio is a non-profit radio station. If you enjoy this or any of their other fine audio programming, why not fling them a couple of dollars? Go to mpr.nz/donate for more information.